Well, welcome everyone to the Monday, February 7th, 2022 regular town council meeting, town of Cave Creek, Arizona. And let's see here. Oh, Mr. Kautzman, would you lead us in the pledge, please? Or wait a minute, I'm supposed to do roll call first. Let me finally get a meeting right.
Councilmember Royer. Here. Councilmember Morris.
Present.
Councilmember McGuire.
Present.
Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
Councilmember Diefendorfer.
Here.
Councilmember Sova.
Here.
Mayor Bunch.
Here, all present accounted for. Mr. Kautzman, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Under public announcements, I don't have an awful lot to say, except that if you look around, you see the little bitty green stuff looks like carrots popping up out of the ground. That's our globe chamomile, and it's time to jump on that. Just because we got a fire department don't mean that they're going to put the whole town out in case we get stupid and don't take care of our own properties. Call the public. Anybody from staff want to complain? All right. Seeing and hearing none, town manager.
I just have a few announcements. The brush drive, the brush pickup or drop off, I should say, is scheduled for February 12th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. at the Water Ranch, which is 44th Street and Carefree Highway. The Cave Creek Dark Sky Stargazing event, the second event is scheduled for February 19th, 6:30 to 8:30, and that's in the parking lot at Spur Cross Ranch Conservation Area. And there was a newsletter we prepared and went out and should be arriving in your mailboxes. You may have gotten it. There is a baseline survey that we are asking the community to fill out for a customer services satisfaction. So it doesn't take very long to complete, and we encourage you to participate. And last but not least, we did have some public comments and concerns about Ridgeway Drive, and I let the council know, but I wanted to let folks know publicly that we have been out to assess the roadway and right-of-way. We spoke to a couple neighbors about the complaints, and the Public Works town engineer, the town marshal, and I have been looking at that, and we will get some options to get back to council on what we can do, what the cost would be, and what the timeline would be. So we are working on that. And I think that's it for tonight.
Carrie,
Yes,
getting complaints from all over town about traffic. So when
Yes,
you're
sir.
looking at that, we might pay closer attention to the entire community and perhaps impose upon the MCSO to actually write a ticket or two.
We have had several complaints. I've gotten notice from more than one council member and citizens. So we are trying to set up a meeting with the sheriff's office and go over what they're doing and how they could improve and what the areas are that we're getting the most complaints on, and have a conversation with them. Councilmember Morris asked for a report before council, if possible, regarding the enforcement activities based on the report that Maricopa County has put out. And so we're looking to have a conversation about that and see when we could schedule something before council.
Thank you. Action item, consent agenda approval of the January 3rd, 2022 regular council meeting minutes and approval of January 18th regular council meeting minutes. We have motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let's go ahead and have it. General agenda item number 1 be presentation of the quarterly utilities report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So I'd just like to go through and highlight what's been going on in the Utilities Department for the last quarter and give you guys some updates on some of the measures that we were using in the department. Next slide, Brian. So we'll start off by talking about our CAP water allocation and how we, this past year, how we tracked where it got sent to. I'll repeat this again a little bit later, but right now our allocation is the 2,606 acre feet of municipal industrial water supply and 386 acre feet of non-Indian agricultural water. The transfer of the 378 acre feet of the municipal industrial has not happened with Carefree. So we have the weekly meetings with them, but I haven't heard anything. So I'm not sure why it's sort of delayed, but we anticipate that will occur this year. So the new number to remember instead of 2606 is 2228. That's our new acre feet of municipal and industrial supplies by the end of this year once that transfer occurs. But this slide is trying to show where we, of the CAP water that we used last year, where it went to in the system. You can see it's bar charts. We're seeing Cave Creek and Carefree customers. That's what was delivered directly to our customers. The red is what was being delivered to Desert Hills. And then the blue on top of that is the stack graph is the CAP water that was delivered to the Rancho Mignon golf course. And we'll get into more details later on Rancho Mignon deliveries on future slides.
May I ask a question then?
Yes. Yes.
Total transfer breakdown for 2021 is 2,119 acre feet.
Mhm.
And you say we have 2,228?
Right now, we actually have 2606 because the transfer hasn't occurred and we're still providing water to the 540 Carefree customers.
Okay.
So, yeah, so it is confusing. We are in this transition period, so the numbers are a little bit in flux, but typically, historically, the 540 Carefree customers consumed about 300 acre feet. So as that transitions, and I have a slide later to talk about that, it starts to occur, that'll start to shift. And then once the transfers occurred, then that'll not be part of our municipal and industrial supplies anymore. Next slide, Brian. This is something we started a while ago with council to try and measure the revenue versus non-revenue water, the non-billed water in our system. When we work with ADWR, they actually also have a number that they use. They actually calculate a little differently, but we thought this is a good way for us to look at it. We're looking at the treated water that we put out from our water treatment plant. The treated CAP water is actually the amount of water sent from our water treatment plant into the system is measured by the main meter at that site. And then we're looking at the revenue waters is the consumption that we build on a monthly basis. So this is you can see the orange at the bottom is the deliveries, again, direct deliveries to Cave Creek and Carefree customers directly tied to the system. The red is showing the transfer on Cloud Road, which is the interconnect to send water to Desert Hills. You can see the gap between what we sent in the system and what we've billed for. If you just use those raw numbers, you get a non-revenue water percentage of 10.6%. So we want that to be below 10. The next slide, I'll show something that we're thinking about doing is because right now, when we transfer that water to Desert Hills, there are treatment and transmission losses that aren't being accounted for that. So, and we brought this up during the rate study, we'd like to actually start adding that into that transfer and take some of that loss in the system for actually treating the water and to convey it in the system and apply that to Desert Hills directly. But this also goes back to just the metering and accuracy that we have in the system. I've presented before on the town's water billing metering. And we believe we've got the program starting next year. We've had to do some work this year to actually start changing out meters in the main Cave Creek system. The meters that we have tested have been showing that they're typically reading low. So we are losing water accounting and revenue in effect. So we need to start changing out the meters. The majority of the meters in the Cave Creek system were put in the 2005 timeframe. So yeah, they're at the end of their useful life, and we need to start changing those out so we can get better accounting. And then our non-revenue water percentage will start to decrease, I think, significantly.
Where's the reclaimed water at from the water treatment plant?
Doesn't show up on these slides. It shows up in a later slide. So we that shows up in our deliveries to the Rancho Mignon golf course.
So you're counting that as a revenue source?
Yes, we do bill that to them. So this is just for the water deliveries, but it's that the contract we have a Rancho Mignon and we deal with separately. We account for separately. It's
That seems optimistic. Because you got the overflow, you have the water that's not being, that we put over there that evaporates or
Mm.
percolates. We got to come up with a way to work that into our efficiency somehow. Because if we didn't have that stream of water going there, are we taking all of the reclaimed water from the wastewater treatment plant? Is it all going to Rancho Mignon, or is there any overflow from that water alone?
Well, a subsequent slide, you'll see that we calculate that. So we actually do have a meter on the overflow. So we have that calculated, and we actually have what we believe are good numbers on the evaporation losses on those lakes and what we think might be liner losses that they're having. So we have a pretty good understanding of how that system is working at this point. But to answer one question is, yeah, all the effluent that gets treated from the plant is delivered up to the Rancho Mignon Golf Course. We don't have another spot to put that water right now. That's actually something I want to work on with the master plan, is we have to come up with a recharge program to do something with that water when Rancho Mignon doesn't need it. So we're not overflowing that lakes and make that system more in balance. So that's something very important, I think, as the system grows, and that would give us a water resource also in the town.
Thank you.
So. Next slide, Ryan. Again, this is similar with Desert Hills, where we calculate in Desert Hills, we actually have 3 wells, but they come into the system at 2 reservoir booster sites. So we have the metering there. We have so we can measure the production from the wells and the interconnected 24th Street and Cloud Road. And so that's the green line is the total of that. And you can see the stacked bar graphs are actually what we get for meter reading. So just refresh everybody's memory, most of the meters out in Desert Hills were changed out after 2015. So they're fairly new. They're our Neptune meters. They're very good and robust and been showing very good promise. We're trying to install those in the Cave Creek system when possible. But this is showing where we, by changing out those metering and getting better understanding of the system. But what I talked about, that what this doesn't account for is the fact that in Desert Hills, this is showing less than 1% revenue water when we look at over a year-long period. But the fact that we actually have to treat and deliver water to Desert Hills isn't accounted for. And that's something, again, we want to bring up in the rate study. We brought that to the consultants, and our contract with the city of Phoenix, when they treat and deliver our CAP allocation and deliver it to us, there's a 5% assumed transmission and treatment loss. Our contract to wheel Carefree's CAP allocation to them, there's a 5% allocation. So we think it's only fair to actually, for Desert Hills, we account for a treatment and transmission loss to Desert Hills and push some of that, not to try and push it, but actually properly allocate some of the system losses to Desert Hills. Next slide, Brian. The next couple of slides do talk about overall water balancing at the treatment plant. And I thought this slide, I'm looking at it, I might clean it up a little bit more, but gives you a bit better of an idea of what we talk about when we talk about things. The yellow line on the side, on the right side or left side of the exhibit, is the 16-inch CAP line, and it actually continues past what we call the golf cap and golf course metering vault, the blue dot. And then there's 2 turnoffs. One comes to the Paul filter membrane system, and there's one to the West Tech filters. We also measure when I talk about the Cleary to near well, there's actually 2 flow meters that can measure that volume. One's actually inoperable right now, but they're actually backups to each other. So that measures all the treated water that gets delivered from either the West Techs or the Paul filters, gets delivered to the clear well and then pumped out of the system. Because we are currently not sending any water to the Linda site. We haven't done that for a number of years. So that's a good measure. We actually have any CAP divert. The way the Paul membranes were set up is that if they can't accept the CAP water, there's actually a diversion. It goes into the reclaim pit for the plant, and then the reclaim pit is also all that water from the West Tex is actually also sent up to the golf course that is above the CAP meter. So when we talk about that, it gets confusing very quickly when we start trying to add these numbers. So I figure the graphic would help everybody a bit better understand. And then we also have a decant flow, where we actually send some of the town's wastewater treatment flow. The process flow goes to the sewer. That's the portion that we can't be treated in. It can actually get into the wastewater stream, and we can treat it at the wastewater plant. So I'll try and work on something a little bit better, but this was a quick one to try and explain when we start talking about all the different numbers, this is where they're coming from on the site itself. Next slide, Brian. And that's what we're trying to do here with this. This is a new exhibit. I think we showed it last time, and we're going back only 9 months because there were some questions on some of the metering at the beginning of the year. So we've been working with staff to try and clean this up. And this is really trying to get a good idea of an overall water flow at the treatment plant and where water is going to. So you can see the stacked graph. The light blue is actually what we measure at the CAP canal. That's our meter at the CAP canal at their first booster pump station. You can see it's typically below when we actually look at the flow values that we know where the water goes at the plant. We're typically about 15% less than what we're actually producing at the plant. So it's really pushing the need to actually go back down to the CAP boosters pump station and actually upgrade that meter. It used to be an old propeller-based meter. 2017, it was changed out to not a magnetic flow meter. It was actually just in another different type of insertion meter. But I do think we're getting some overall inaccuracies in our system because we can't get a good understanding of the water being delivered up the pipeline. Is really what this is coming down to. So I've mentioned that before, and we actually are trying to work on a project to get that work done.
Which number do we pay CAP for?
Their meter, they consider that their meter down there. So it's deliveries.
And so we'll lose money if we put a good meter in.
Yeah, we'll understand where the water's going. So yeah, they also round up. So when we talk to them, they talk about total acre feet when we actually have more accurate metering at the site. So when you start adding up the inaccuracies, but it should be less than 15%.
Isn't that their
Yeah.
choice of meter? Didn't they force us to change it and put that one in?
They asked us to change out the old propeller meter. And it was supposed to be an interim meter that got put in 2017, I think is what the record showed. So we need to get that out. It was supposed to be an interim meter until we put a magnetic flow meter in at the site. And the magnetic flow meter will require us to actually cut into the pipe and actually reconfigure the site to get that to install. That's what their standard they did like us to install. Next slide, Brian. So this is, we've shown this for a long time, is our water leaks versus our hydrant flushing. I'm proud to acknowledge my staff have been really, when we see leaks in the system, they're very proactive about getting out there and getting on them as quick as we can. We're doing a lot of work in trying to eliminate repeat breaks, especially in service lines. So instead of just putting a wrap on it, a small repair band, we're actually replacing the service lines in totality so that we don't go back again and put another wrap on it, and keep coming back to it. So we have been seeing the number of leaks go down. What you'll see on the hydrant spike is actually, you'll see February, not so much in May, but you'll see August, the big spike in November. What those are for is actually, or what they're caused by, is the flushing that's happening in our system to meet compliance. Because of the way our system is set up, we have a lot of dead end lines in our system, and we actually have to move water out of our system as water age occurs in the summertime. We have issues with making sure that we can ensure the water is meeting all compliance standards. So we're being more aggressive and proactive with the flushing. You can see that August was the big month for us. We were actually trying a couple of different processes to make sure that we can move water in certain areas of the system out. But I think consistently we'll see that. It's a matter of how our system is set up. We don't have a large customer base for the amount of distribution lines that we have in our system. So we will have to probably think of other ways of treating this. The Paul membranes have helped because they've helped with our TOC, our total organic carbon removal in the system, which helps things like our TTHMs, disinfectant byproducts. Sorry for the acronyms. But water age is still an issue in our system. And that's really what the flushing program is needed for. And especially during the summertime when the water does heat up in the pipes, it sits there and people aren't there. So we have a lot of winter visitors that aren't here in the summertime. So we have areas of the system that actually do have low flow. So I'm trying to see what we can do with this with modeling or other things, but just wanted to point that out. That's why you're seeing those big jumps in those quarterly months. It's because of the compliance needs in the system.
Sean?
Yes.
Mayor.
Yeah, my question is, are these gallons figured into the rate study because they're part of the maintenance of keeping the system going?
I'm trying to think off the top here. I'll have to talk to the consultants.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
Are they?
Because
Yeah.
what you're buying, the water cost is coming. You're just not getting the revenue for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be
But
part of the
you're paying-
non-revenue.
It's the ratepayers are paying for that
Yeah.
water. Yeah.
Yeah, they're paying for it, but and the treatment, but then once we push it out on the ground,
It already paid for it. Once the
Okay.
cap,
All right.
then it goes to the ground. It just doesn't.
okay, all right, I just want to,
Yeah.
did you have something?
Yes, sir.
Go right ahead.
Sean, how does one keep track of the actual loss for the leaks and flushing? I mean, you have at the bottom of the page, but is it an estimate? I mean, you certainly don't meter it. So
No,
is it best guess or?
It is an estimate. There's some, the staff are pretty good. They can, by seeing the amount of water coming up, bubbling up, they have a good idea. And then, the length of the time. So it is estimates. But because we're estimating every leak, every time they go out and they see something going on, they're putting that into a spreadsheet. We're getting good accounting, but it's all based on an estimate of the staff's understanding of seeing that repair or that leak. Is it an 8-inch line with a lot of pressure? How long has it been running versus a 3/4 inch service line that's just got a leak near the meter that we've got to replace?
Do you meter the water from the hydrant when you flush it?
That's
That would
partly
be
estimated too. We actually do have hydrant meters that the staff can use, but we don't meter it all. So some of it is estimated. It's a combination. In the case of the hydrant flushing, it's a combination. I'd say probably 1/3 is going through meters. 2/3 is just the staff going out and they know the areas and they know how long they're flushing the hydrant for.
Thank you.
So, and going back to the numbers, in our case of, in Cave Creek Carefree, we used 1,300 acre feet of water. So again, we flushed about 20 acre feet. So it adds up, but in proportionality, it's a small portion. So, but it is some of the treated water that has been lost. Next slide, Brian. So this is a graph showing the effluent flows from our water ranch for 2019 through 2021. You can see the 3 bars. 2019 is the blue, 2020 is the red, and 2021 is the orange, solid orange line. You can see there's sort of an impact, and especially when you look at the total amount of effluent produced, we're still into what I would say is a COVID situation where our flows are starting to trend up a little bit more to normals. But in total for the year, we're still down about 15 million gallons in total of effluent that we produced from a typical 2019 year. One thing I'll point out is in August, you'll see the orange line does spike up. That actually was the monsoon storm. So we saw that down at the plant. That was the inflow, I&I inflow and infiltration that we got into the collection system. So that's something that we're proactively trying to work on keeping out of the system. If we had a recharge basin, maybe I could use it, but I don't want to send it down to my plant and treat it and then send it back up to a recharge basin. But that is clearly showing that we still need to continue our work and be proactive. And staff have been starting that process, and council has authorized us to have contractors on board. But it clearly showed when I saw this graph the need for that work to continue tightening up our sewer system. So,
Sean,
yes.
what this says to me is that there's no direct relationship between water consumption and generation of wastewater or effluent, because the graph shows that it's highest during the winter months when additional people are here and they're going to all of the restaurants and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And but they're not using water out of homes. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, it is. So especially in the Phoenix area and actually just Arizona in general, it's the summer months, it's the outdoor water usage for outdoor irrigation and other outdoor usage that shows the reverse peak where the water demand is the highest in the summertime and wastewater flow is the highest in the wintertime. Our case, because of the number of winter visitors that we have about 900 customers on the collection system, and the fact that we've got the businesses slow down during the summertime too, we see a bit more of a drop than you would see in larger city, where you don't have residents are there full time, and then you have more consistent businesses. So ours is a little more spiky than you'd normally see, but you do typically see a bigger peak in the wintertime. So, which is the reverse of the water system. Next slide, Brian. So it's a better exhibit to try and show the Rancho Mignon golf course lake system. I'll just keep showing this every time we do these reports just to keep refreshing everybody. Again, so it's a 3-lake system. We deliver water to the east upper lake, That's actually where our water line from our water ranch and actually the water at the continuation of the cat pipeline that comes up to the lake, come into the East Lake. And that's where we get water from the water treatment plant or the cat pipeline. It overflows into the middle lake. Those upper two lakes are fairly shallow. And then it cascades into the West Lake, which is the deeper one, which is what they use as effectively storage. And that's the one that you typically see the fluctuations in the levels if you're around at the Ranch Mignon golf course. On the bottom of the screen, you'll see their golf course irrigation booster meter. So they draw out at the south end of the West Lake and boost into their system. And then the red line is showing the overflow. So we've had overflow metering now for over 2 years. We have a good understanding of our deliveries to the system. We have good understanding. Obviously, per the contract, we bill on the water that they use, not the water we deliver. But we do actually have a good understanding of the water that overflows when it overflows. And then we actually have good numbers, we believe, on the evaporation that occurs in this. We're actually using a evaporation pond system that Maricopa County uses at Lake Pleasant. So we've been using their data set to actually help calculate what we expect to be the evaporation loss on this system, which helps us better understand the overall system and where the water is going to. Next slide, Brian. And this would be a summary of our deliveries to them. Again, we don't, I know you'll see in the next slides, we don't get payment on what we deliver. We get the payment on what they use. So last year in 2021, we delivered just under 450 acre feet total to them. You can see the orange graph is actually effluent that got sent to the facility. The red is actually the water sent from the water treatment plant. And that's actually the reclaimed and the CAP divert water that we send up. And then the blue is just the raw cap water. So if we just send up, we start the pipeline up and send water directly to them, you can see typically we would send raw cap water to help make up during the summertime. What's unique about this graph, in August, you'll see there's no little blue line on the top. That's, again, the monsoon storms. So when the monsoons came, typically in the summertime, the irrigation demand gets high enough that they start asking for extra raw water cap deliveries, but we didn't have to in August because of the additional effluent that we sent up to them because it was going into the sewer system. And then also because the cooler temperatures and the amount of runoff they had in their system itself. So it's kind of unique to this year that the monsoons had an impact on this side of our balance sheet also. Next slide, Brian. This is the one that this is one we need to get better at control over. So you can see this is trying to show the non-revenue water. So the bar graph for each month, you're seeing the blue is actually the deliveries to the pond, and then the billings that we occurred, which is what they took out of the ponds. And the next slide will show where we get the overflows. But you can see we delivered just under 450 acre feet to them for the total year of 2021. The non-revenue amount right now is about 139 acre feet. So the system has some work to do with it. Next slide, Brian. And this is our better understanding of what's happening to the system when it's not getting consumed by them. So again, the water loss is the calculated pond evaporation, which is the red at the top of the bar graphs. That's where we're coming up. We've been able to work with Maricopa County Flood Control, and we've got their evaporation pond system that they have at Lake Pleasant. So we think we get a good estimate. So we think that's about 48 acre feet last year that occurred based on the surface area of the ponds, and the depth factors into that also. The pond overflow, we had about just under 74 acre feet of water, and that's the orange on the bar graph that overflowed. So that's deliveries that we sent up from the wastewater treatment plant and treated effluent, or it was water coming from the wastewater treatment or the water treatment plant. You can see again, August, September, there was a bit of a delay there where that was largely the losses were coming because they didn't have demands. And we had cooler temperatures, we had monsoon storms, so it comes up and goes down. But this is what we really need to have a conversation with them on. But it's the contract that we have with them says that they get billed on the water consumed. But we wanted to look at this on a quarterly basis to see where we think the water is going and continue that conversation with the golf course. Next slide, Brian. So going from our calculations, getting into some of our other programs. So our Backflow program is the system that we have in place to prevent water from potentially coming back in the system and contaminating the potable water system. So We have 690 devices in the system. We've noticed that through COVID, this is something that some people have sort of put on the back burner in some cases. So we've actually been pushing really actively to keep people on board with making sure that these are important devices, to make sure that they do get tested. So we use a third-party vendor, BSI, that actually regulates the system for us, or sends out the notices and manages it. So in the case if you have a backflow device, we have a list of vendors that can work on our system, and they will actually work with BSI, and BSI takes a small administrative fee for them sending in the report to them. And that's actually what pays for the program itself at this point. So we're glad to report that our percentages are actually coming up. So total non-compliant devices, we had total compliant devices, 73%. And this by the end of the year. In the third quarter, we were at 66. So we did make a push to try and get people back into compliance, and that's sending them the notices that they need to do. And then the total non-compliant devices did drop. So again, this is just another important program for making sure that we are regulating our system and making sure that it's safe. Next slide, Brian. The next is one of our other compliance programs on the wastewater side, which is our pre-treatment. It's sometimes referred to our grease interceptors, but it's actually referred to as the pre-treatment in town code. And we actually do not just have grease interceptors. We actually have oil sand separators in the system, and anything that could potentially damage or both the collection system or send material down to the wastewater treatment plant that we can't efficiently treat. So that's why it's called a pre-treatment program. So we actually brought in a vendor, Western Environmental, to help us. I think I mentioned that actually in another update, but they finished their report. They've done a phase 1, which is to look at our program, look what we've got. They looked at our code. They're providing some suggested recommendations. I'm thinking of bringing it back for phase 2, which is to help us complete the full inventory. And the other thing is we're looking at changing how we're administering the program. We've been looking at, and vernaculars, where we see larger grease interceptors, they typically have 3 chambers, and we've been averaging the chambers. It's now become more standard practice that you just look at your last chamber. If you have material in your last chamber, that the assumption is that the device isn't working correctly, and then you don't want material in last chambers. That's in line with some of the bigger municipalities. Tempe, Phoenix are going to that. So we're looking at changing that standard. But before we do it, we will come and brief council more fully on that. But I just want to let you know that that's something we're changing. Looking at changing. That will be going towards, again, trying to make sure that everybody is in compliance, and that we've got the devices, and that we're protecting the collection system and the treatment plant, which is what this program is required to do. Next slide, Brian. So update on some water resources. I sort of spoke about that at the beginning of the slide, at the beginning of the presentation. We've got the sort of the delivery schedule on the side there. That was based on the assumption that we'd have all of our municipal industrial supplies and our non-union agricultural supplies for the year. We know sometime during the year there will be an adjustment. We expected, actually, we should have heard by now as far as the cap transfer. So this will be adjusted. And the other thing that we're trying to do this year is actually to recharge some of the excess water that's not sent directly to customers. So we've got the contracts in place to allow us to do that. We have the ADWR permits to do that. And we're actually looking to put in the budgets in place. There is some legislation that we're waiting on to get changed. It's referred to as water buds, and it has an impact on us of generating long-term storage credits. So there's a move afoot. We believe there's some legislation changes that will be working in the town's favor as that moves forward. So we've been talking with Michelle Van Quathen about watching that and making sure that moves forward. So we will be tracking this, and we'll making sure that the town gets the best use of our CAP allocations. But there are some regulatory challenges right now that we're working through. But the work that we did last year to make sure that we had the permits in place with both Phoenix and the Central Arizona project and with ADWR is all sets us up in the future. And it's not for waste, but it's something that right now we do have a challenge. The real challenge is that if we put the water in the ground, we can't generate long-term storage credits until this water budget legislation changes. But we sort of knew that going in last year, expecting it to be changed, and we still think it's moving forward. We just haven't seen the full legislation move forward. So, but I'll keep council briefed on that as it moves. But our goal is, again, to get the best usage of our allocation that we have. Next slide, Brian. Actually, skip the next slide. I'm just going to highlight some of the larger CIP projects that we actually have ongoing. I always got my list here, and there's actually a lot, so I only highlighted a couple. The biggest one is the City of Phoenix Interconnect. So Black and Veatch, who's our designer, has completed a basis of design report, and we're wrapping up our comments to them. They're currently also looking on their scope of work. So the contract that we awarded to them was to get them to the basis of the design report and what we refer to as a 30% design on the site. So we've reached that milestone. So we'll give them their comments back on the report, which are minor. And then we'll come back to council with an amendment to their scope to finish the design work to get it up through design. The other thing we're looking to do is I'd like to pre-select a contractor, do what's referred to as a construction manager at risk. The benefit, I think, to the town is that brings someone on board now at this phase of the design and allows them to have some input into what's going on with both the design, constructability, things like equipment deliveries. That's something that looking out, I'm very nervous about is some of our equipment, larger equipment that we have, both delivery schedules and cost of that. So if we bring someone on board earlier in the process, they can actually give us that feedback now, and we can look at, can we build what we have with what we have budget wise, or do we have to do some amendments to that? So the other alternative to view is to let Black and Veatch complete the design, and then we go out and do a low bid. I just think that puts the town at a little bit of a risk at this point without having that input up front, because the design at this current schedule wouldn't be complete until later in the fall. So if we have someone on board to help out before that timeframe to give us some numbers and understanding, we'd have a better understanding of what that project will be. The other thing we're going to be doing is doing an application to the Water Infrastructure Finance Authority. So I'll be presenting that, and we'll be coming back to council for a resolution to approve that. That allows us to actually look out to get a bonding. It doesn't require us to take the money if it moves forward, but it's part of the process.
Couple questions there.
Yes.
Why are we choosing WIFA? I mean, why are we going with WIFA rather than bonding or going to the banks like we did with the other ones, especially with regard to the inflexibility in payback? We're going to be swimming in money in the utility systems starting in the late 20s. So is this another 20-year contract that we can't do anything about and can't pay off early?
Mayor, Councilmember Morris, this is just one of more than one option. And the way WIFA works, you have to just get on their list. We have to go through the process to get on the list to even apply. So this is just a process to get on their list. First of all, there's pros and cons to different ways of financing. And you're right, we will look at other options, but you've got to have the design and engineering done on all the projects to go out so that you know what your costs are going to be when you go for a total bond for all of the projects, because you're given a fixed amount of money and a very defined period of time to complete the projects.
Which is the real world. That's the way the world
Okay.
works. You have a defined time to
Right. But
complete. Yeah.
again, in the times of costs and, having a good design and cost for all of our projects all at one time, and to be able to go out to do that may or may not work. We need to look at all of our options.
Mhm.
So this is just getting on the list for WIFA.
The second thing is the Phoenix contract, they're going to finish with their facilities a certain date.
Mhm.
Are we clued in so that our facilities finish about contemporaneously?
Yeah, I actually got an email out to Phoenix. The contract, the last conversation I had with Phoenix is they looked at it as the date that they executed the contract, which would be January of 2024 is when they would say they need to be complete with their water line project from the south end. They recently sent me 90% plans to review, and I made comments back to them. And then, so they've got their designers selected. They're about to wrap up the design, and I understand they might have had a construction manager. And I was originally told they were delaying construction till next calendar year. That might be moving up. So I do want to have that conversation with it, but we're gearing to try and get everything done at the same time, because they can't complete their work with coming up and tying on the bottom end of our 16-inch water line in Cave Creek Road until we actually have a place to put the water, because we actually have to physically show that we're disconnected from the system. So we do. That's why we're trying to get this geared up this way. I'd like to get a construction manager on board to help start pricing this out, and maybe even get some stuff pre-purchased, some pumps and some other stuff that we know that we're going to need for the project.
So when are you going to start construction?
My goal will be this physically start construction by the end of this calendar year. I'm thinking in probably less than 12 months of construction, but if we can do some pre-purchases before that and get some equipment purchased and get that in queue, that's the longest lead item we're going to have on this project, is getting the electrical equipment and the pumps and motors. So I want to get that ordered as soon as we can. By doing something like construction manager at risk, we can actually do an early guarantee maximum price with them to get that equipment ordered as soon as Black & Veatch is done with their design. So yeah, I think I'd say 12 months realistically with that schedule. But right now, I'm nervously seeing some other projects in the Valley and watching and talking to other friends in the Valley doing this type of business, and delivery schedules are not certain at this point. You get one schedule one day and it ships out another 2 months the next day. It's in flux. So the biggest thing I have to do is just keep coordinating with Phoenix. So when they hit the ground starting their project, we need to be under construction, I think, and then we'll be coordinated. The last thing we can do is just make sure that they can't make the connection, or we'll have to talk to them about how we coordinate that connection. And that's a 16-inch water line that we have in Cave Creek Road, just outside of Walmart is where it currently ends. But they'll be going actually up into the intersection and installing a new isolation valve, and then tying the line back over to a 12-inch line that they have that continues to the west on the south side of Carefree Highway as part of the project, and then disconnecting from us. But we have to have our site to accept that water at that point, because I don't think they're going to be comfortable just having a valve isolating our water systems at that point. They want more separation than that, but that's what I'll be coordinating with them. So another project we had ongoing was the study of the wells. That was a study because the town does have a number of wells in our name. When we bought the water company, I believe there was 8 wells as part of the transfer. But an effort was done a few years ago when someone looked at the ADWR records and saw any records that said Cave Creek Water Company were actually transferred into the town's name. So some of those I think were in error, so we're just cleaning that up. But part of this is going back to physically seeing what infrastructure we have in place. Are any of these viable, or how are they located? So we just last week did the site survey with NCS engineers. The next step is they'll come back with a report, and then we'll bring a consultant on board to some of these wells still have old pumps and motors in them. So we have to get those pulled out, and then we'll do some videoing and evaluation and see if any of the old casings are still viable, or what we might do with them and come up with a recommendation. And this will feed right into the master plan effort that can really truly evaluate. But from what I saw last week, there's a couple of wells that I think we just need to start thinking about getting out of the system and properly abandoning, because I don't see how they're going to be useful for us moving forward. They were useful for the old water company, but moving forward, a lot of these wells, I don't think, and we'll also look in video and potentially do some water quality data. I don't think the water quality is going to be such that we want to put them directly back into our water distribution system. So, but that's part of this is just to get a handle on that physically. What do we have? Next slide, Brian. So in Desert Hills, we have 4 steel storage reservoirs that are currently active, 1 reservoir site that's inactive. It's our 5th site. So over the last couple of weeks, we actually had a diving team come in, and they actually both cleaned out the debris at the bottom and at the same time did a full video inspections of the reservoirs. They're actually in better shape than I expected. But those reports are actually being sent to NCS as the consultant we selected for that project, and it's going to NCS, and they will be looking at designing the recommendations for the improvements. Typically, you schedule these companies that do that type of work, and especially how our system works is you want to do it in the fall and in the winter time. You don't want to do it during the summertime when you need that reservoir storage. So, but I'm actually happy to report that I was concerned, but now that I've seen inside those tanks, the last reports were done in about 2015. There wasn't that much debris. A few of them, the ones directly tied to the wells, actually had sand in them, which we expected coming out of the wells. But the other ones were actually in good shape, and there wasn't as much deterioration as I expected. That we would have expected to have occurred since 2015, the last time they were inspected. So I think we're going to be in good shape and potentially not needing all the money that we set aside for that program in Desert Hills. We do have 1 of our 3 wells in Desert Hills is currently out at the 10th Street site. So that's actually scheduled to go back in this year. We've had our issues with our Galvin well, which we've completed and got that back into service. And we took this time to actually pull the 10th Street well because it hasn't been out for a number of years. look at the casing, look to drop the motor down. One other thing we want to do is actually put in what's called a pressure transponder into it. And we're actually going to try and go back and do this at the Galvin well. We've got the piping installed, which will allow us to monitor the groundwater table live and tie that back to our SCADA system. So we're trying to get that done. Well, we will be getting that done in the next few months. We'll have at least monitoring at those 2 sites. We don't have the pipe work installed at the Joy Ranch well to do that. We'd have to pull that back out. But the next time we do schedule to pull that out, which will probably be in a year or two, we'll add that feature at that site so we can monitor that groundwater table also. And on the wastewater side, the big one I want to talk about is the inlet screen. I mentioned to council about that, and I'll show a picture later that the reason why. So council did authorize us to move forward with that. So right now we're just working with Wilson engineers on a small scope of work to help them. They did the evaluation, and the goal will be to have them look at the submittals. We have the submittal from the manufacturer. So until we approve the submittal, they won't start the fabrication. So I want to get that done in the next couple of weeks so that I can get that in scheduled. It's currently scheduled to hit around summer timeframe. So it's about a 16 or 10-week delivery at this point, but everything's in flux. Every time when you talk to a vendor, it seems like it's moved out. All the projects that I had, which were due in the last couple of weeks, are all seem to be pushing out. So, but the sooner I get that in, the better. And that's, again, protecting the treatment plant itself, the wastewater treatment plant, and the equipment at the plant. So it's a big project for us. Next slide, Brian. Next big operational project I want to talk about is the disconnect project with Carefree. So that's ongoing. We're participating by having a weekly meeting. I attend that weekly meeting with their project team that they have. At this point, there's only 14 physically. None of the 540 customers have been disconnected from the system. There is one area where there's 14 meters that have been Carefree installed their meters into the system. It's in a development called Tranquil Place. And we spent a few months, and I'll give credit to my staff. They actually figured out how to take the meter reading from Carefree and tie it into our system electronically. So they sorted all that out. So I think it'll bode as well moving forward for both agencies as they change them out. And as of this week, I just actually learned after I prepared these slides that we refer to it as Neighborhood C, the area north of Carefree Highway, or Cave Creek Road, sorry, and Scopa Trail. They're going to start changing out the meters as of today. They started actually in Ocotillo Ridge, and they're working their way down. So they're putting in their meters into the boxes. It's still our water. I've been told it's probably 2 to 3 months before they start doing the transition. They want to start up a Neighborhood C where they'll actually start converting the customers over to their system. So, and I recently did the review. They actually gave us all the plans for all 3 neighborhoods. And we recently gave them some review comments back on that. So as we've been going through this, we've been updating and sometimes having to go do field work to verify where the lines are. So, but we want to make sure that everything's clearly discussed so that when we go into it, there's a minimal impact to our existing customers, and we end up with the best system we can at the end. So that took some staff work both in the office and in the field, but I think we're moving ahead, and it seems like a cordial relationship right now. So I'll give credit to Greg Crossman and his design team. So they're keeping us informed and involved. So it's the best that we can get out of this, I think. So.
Sean, is
Yes.
there an anticipated date that Carefree has to where the entire project will be complete?
They haven't shared a complete overall schedule with me, and even the designs I reviewed just the other week, it included all of neighborhood C, B, and neighborhood A is the largest area now by Carefree Highway, but it did not include the properties that are west of Cave Creek Road. So even that, I haven't even seen a design on yet. That would be Lowe's for CVS's, the storage unit, and there's actually 2 areas that bump out that are actually residential neighborhoods. So overall schedule, I think they're still on track for about 12 to 18 months. They have a lot of work on their system that they're starting on to backfeed these areas properly, but we're working with it. Greg was telling me in the next 2 to 3 months he'll be converting some of the customers over. That's all I know at this point. So it's a bit in flux. So we're just working with them as best we can. Next slide, Brian. So I mentioned our water ranch and or just the collection system in general. So show you some of the issues. I mentioned the problems with our influent screen, and showing you what happens. The slide on the right hand side there, that is actually material that came through the wastewater system got into the plant because the influent screen isn't working properly right now and got all the way to a pump at the back end. So some plastic pieces. So it shows the need to make sure that we've got good influent screening. I can't say that we would have caught all that, but we would have minimized that. Another project that we've completed in the last quarter is actually, we're still continuing to work at the Ranch Mignon lift station. So that green pipe you're seeing there is actually the Chipperosa lift station actually discharges directly into that site. What was happening is that the Chipperosa flow, because it's pump flow, would actually cascade across and actually cause odors at the site. So that green pipe actually in the white basin actually collects that flow as it comes out of the pipe and directs it directly down. So it's not cascading and causing more odor issues. So that was successfully done. And the last one is actually the, I mentioned the council before, but it's just repeating it. I didn't realize, I forgot it was actually in this last quarter. It was in October, we added the second pump, the high pressure pump at the Ranch Mignon site. So we did the first one, it proves to be successful. Now we've got the second one installed and the site has, we've added a significant amount of capacity to that site. So it seems to be working a lot better. So we'll still continue. I think the biggest crux we have at the Ranch Mignon lift station site is the inflow and infiltration that we get during stormwater events. So we're continuing to work to clean up and repair the manholes and lines in the system. But we I almost think we're almost quite, haven't quite, but almost doubled the capacity of that site with the pumps that we've installed this past year. Next slide. Another project that our staff worked on with an outside vendor was actually down to Water Ranch itself. So when we talked about flow monitoring at the Water Ranch, we actually typically, there's a magnetic flow meter at the back end of the plant that's by the disc filters, and that's what we use as our effluent flow meter, but we don't have a good understanding of the water that's coming into the system, and then that would help us calculate like things like losses when we remove material from the site. So we've worked on actually trenching. It's right next to the trailer. So this trench patches across our driveway to the manhole, the last manhole before it gets into the influent wet well. So we installed the new flow meter in that device. We're actually just working with the vendor to calibrate it. So the initial results would seem to be reading a little bit high. So we're just cleaning that up. But that'll give us another data point on the flow coming in. It was interesting seeing the trends because we think it's a little high right now, so they've got to scale it down. But because of our flow, we don't see what you'd typically see in a collection system because of the pumping nature of our flow. Most of our flow goes to the Ranch Mignon lift station, which is pumped. So you see more spikiness than you'd typically see in a collection system. So it was kind of unique, and this meter proved it out. This meter also gives us a benefit. It actually will give us alarming. If the influent wet well is not working, we can set this meter so it actually will call out the operators and give them another alarm point to make sure that we don't back up the plant. So another improvement. We're just continuing to work on stuff. Next project. Last distribution. Again, all of our staff are working at, the one thing you're not seeing on here is our maintenance staff and our internal staff. Everybody's been doing a great job, and I can't say enough for all the credit they've been doing for everything. So I'm not just highlighting I can't tell you about everything because I'd be here for 2 hours, and I think all the guys would shoot me in the office. But I just want to highlight as the last slide here is just the projects we're doing in the distribution system itself. So we've been dealing, again, every quarter we seem to have issues with main leaks and service leaks. So the crew has been very proactive in getting out there and doing that. We've been continuing to update our system mapping and uncovering valves. That's one day I'd like to say it's done, but just this past Friday, we were actually going in and we were trying to actually expose one valve to make sure how the piping configuration, and lo and behold, we found another valve that had been buried. It was never shown on any maps anywhere. So near our Galloway booster station. So it's like a box of chocolates, and every day is a new one sometimes, but we're getting there, and the mapping gets better every day as we work on this, including things like where our meters are and tying everything back to our billing account. So there's a lot of work being done on the distribution system, and it'll allow the town and whoever sits in the seat or in our staff in the future just run this system better and more efficiently. And we've been really working on the metering. We've had some issues with meters failing. Largely, we've been seeing, I think last time I showed you when we brought forward the recommendation to allow us to change out the Itron metering equipment and software. I showed you one of those. So what we're largely seeing is both the meters are becoming aging out and becoming inaccurate, but we're seeing the electronic radio read system is sort of aging out also. So what we're seeing here is a couple of pictures of some older meters in our newer models. The newer model being the one on the right-hand side, that's our Neptune meter. Typically, we don't attach the radio antenna, but we can actually attach a remote radio antenna onto that and get a better signal out of that. So we can, again, pick it up at a further distance, which helps our routing and be more efficient with it. But we have to get the system changed out. In Desert Hills, that was done back in, I think it was completed around 2015, 16. But that was largely done because Desert Hills, when the town purchased the system, was all manual read. So they changed those out to radio read systems, and we really like the Neptune meters. So we'll be changing everything out. But yeah, we've had our challenges with that, just trying to keep up with it. So we've got that in the capital program. Hopefully it's successful and moving forward, but that would be a good benefit to get better help staff resources and actually get us better accounting of the system and properly bill our customers.
Sean, on the meters, it sounds like you're getting some good data on how long we can expect a meter to last. I know there's a lot of mathematics in the literature about how long towns, most of them have set policies, so many million gallons through a meter, systems that have a lot of wells with sand. It's not a very big number. Treated water, surface water like ours, usually it's a much larger number. They last longer. Is the town going to have a policy based on the mathematics and economics for when we're going to change meters out? So we don't go through and all of a sudden they're all gone. A routine way of keeping water losses low and economic recovery high.
Yeah, I really want to work. The one firm that we found that's helped us with the changing out of the meters, we actually want to work with them on a meter testing program, which would allow us to, on an annual basis, pull meters out of the system. We can do it by age, the water passing through them. Largely in your program, or typically you would go for your larger meters, your 1.5 and larger, which we don't have too many in the system, but we have some of those, and you get those pulled out and looked at on an annual basis to make sure they're still reading correctly. So that is something that I do want to implement this upcoming year. This past year, we've been struggling with just the number of what we refer to as the rereads. So when the staff go out and they do the routes and the radio equipment's failed. So we actually physically have to go back to that box and actually go manually read that meter. Once that's done, then we'll be starting to implement it next year, is working with that vendor to come up with the parameters of a meter testing program, so that we can look at proactively and forecasting what type of meter bodies and when we think we might start seeing failures. But we got to get past this issue with most of these meters that we're seeing were installed 2004, 2005 seems to be the serial number I've seen on them, and the face numbers. So before we bought the system, when Global Water had bought the system, they came in and installed a lot of these meters. And my understanding, some of them were used at that time. They'd been used maybe for a year at another system, and they got brought over. So we're dealing with that legacy work to clean that up. But yeah, we want to be proactive, because things like the larger meters, you want to test typically annually to make sure they are reading correctly, so that you are getting good, accurate numbers. And then you just rotate them through the stock, rotate them back to the vendor. He'll test them and verify. And then you can, if they're testing good, you put them back on the shelf to reinstall back in the system. So we want to implement that as well as the meter changeout program. So with that, I can take any other questions.
Sean,
Yes.
is the utility department currently fully staffed?
Yes, we are. We don't have any vacancies. Could I use more staff? That's another.
I mean, need a job, Ron?
Yes. Has to pay more than this.
But that said, what's your total number of staff?
You caught me off guard there, because I think if we include the billing clerks, we're 18 or 19 full-time employees, I think, running both the two water systems and the wastewater system. I think we're at right now. So we are a fairly lean staff, and that's where we've been utilizing contractors. Like we use this a very good contractor. We built a relationship for a hydrant maintenance program. The meter servicing, we actually found a vendor who can do that, and they have contracts to both do the meter testing and change them out. So we're trying to utilize staff or contractual resources wherever possible. But yeah, we're a fairly lean organization for all the things that we do. So
It's that time of year. This was my second annual inquiry. How many fire hydrants are out of service?
can I get back to you on that one? Because I know I just saw one yesterday. Let me get with my supervisor.
Let's see, this is February.
Yeah.
About April 1st. Is that fire season? Somebody? Middle of March.
Yeah.
Middle of March. So we're
I'll get a report
6
out.
weeks out.
I'll get a report out through Carrie this end of this week. Yeah, I know there's a couple out of service because they couldn't find isolation valves. Well, I'll talk to the vendor about that. They're keeping their tally list. So again, we've been very successful. And if you go through town, I think you see, I would say you see a marked improvement in just the appearance of them and let alone the functionality of them. So, but I'll get a number back for you. So.
Anything else from council? There is public comment on this. Okay. How about employee comment? Seeing, hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
General agenda. Item number 2. Council discussion and possible approval to purchase a 2022 Ford Explorer for an amount up to $53,720.67.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. We're before you tonight to request for the expenditure for a 2022 Ford Explorer. We had a 2019 Chevy Traverse that had sudden deceleration trauma, and it wasn't recoverable. Our insurance company did reimburse us for the cost of that vehicle. They gave us $33,008, and we've already received that back. In searching for a replacement vehicle, turns out that the chip issue that everybody has heard about over the news and everything really played havoc with trying to find vehicles. We weren't able to order a vehicle because orders only can be done at this point in time in about August. And then we are still waiting for deliveries of vehicles that we were here talking to you about earlier this year. And then we did finally find somebody who was willing to sell to us on state contract for a vehicle that was on their lot, which became a challenge when we were shopping out there because not many people want to sell a vehicle under what they can get to the general public right now because they're selling everything over the sticker. So with that, this would replace the 2019 Chevy Traverse. We were able to fund this through the savings that we had from over the budget expenses for the 2021 Tahoe that we had. We also had a 22 Chevy, or the 21 Silverado, 22 Tahoe, and the 2022 Case Loader that has already previously come before council.
Question from council? I've got one. Did we give Sanderson a shot?
Yes.
That's a crying shame. They didn't have anything for us since they've been so supportive of the community. Public comment on this one. Employee comment. Back to council for a motion, please.
I'll make the motion. Motion to approve the purchase of a 2022 Ford Explorer from Santan Ford under state contract ADSP 017-166124 for an amount up to $53,720.67.
Second.
Comment.
Well, since I saw an ad on Facebook where somebody is trying to sell his truck for $102,000, this is a good deal. So I think that this is a very positive action.
Anything else from council?
No.
It is financial and I see you're ready to go, so go for it.
Councilmember Morris,
Yes.
Councilmember McGuire,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Smith,
Yes.
Councilmember Diefenderfer,
Yes.
Councilmember Silva,
Yes.
Councilmember Royer,
Yes.
Mayor Bunch.
Yes, motion passes 7-0. Agenda item number 3, council discussion, possible approval of resolution R 2022-02, a resolution of the mayor and town council of the town of Cave Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, finding certain facts and adopting a submittal date by which to file an application for a major amendment to the town of Cave Creek general plan of February 1st of each calendar year. Placed on the agenda by the planning director. Mr. Kautzman, please explain to me what we're doing here.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. As we are all aware, we've got the 2021 general plan that is currently effective upon voter ratification last May. The ARS, the state statutes, have very specific regulations on how general plan can be adopted, the process by which it can be adopted or amended. The one area that they allow some discretion with municipalities is adopting written procedures for processing those, specifically a date by which a major amendment can be filed in each calendar year. The state requires that the legislative body hear all requests to make a major amendment to a general plan in the calendar year in which it's submitted. Previously, the town used April 1st as the deadline for submittal. This resolution would move that date up to February 1st of the calendar year. And the rationale for that is to allow for more flexibility in processing the case within the calendar year it's submitted. In the past, April 1st seemed like a good idea. I think someone picked April 1st as a joke, potentially, but it can be tricky when trying to process these through, especially in the summer months, because a lot of folks aren't here, and staff has, gotten blowback over the year of, oh, you're processing this during the summer when no one's here. Obviously, well, because of an April 1st deadline, it kind of pushes our calendar up. So February 1st would give us more time to process this, slow and steady. And should we get any applications to amend, I'm hoping that we avoid those, but you never know. And with that, I'll answer any questions you have.
So this year, the date of April 1st will stand because since we're already past February 1st.
And
This
I don't
will take- this will-
anticipate receiving an application
Okay.
prior to April 1st this
Okay.
year.
So we wouldn't have denied anyone their due process at this point
Correct.
in time. Okay. All right. There is a public comment on this one. Golly gee, nobody has anything. Okay. We're back to council for a motion, please.
Make a motion to approve resolution R 2022-02, a resolution of mayor and town council of the town of Cave Creek, Maricopa County, Arizona, finding certain facts and adopting a submittal date by which to file an application for a major amendment to the town of Cave Creek general plan of February 1st, first in paren of each calendar year.
Second.
All those in comments?
No, sir.
So just clarification, this is a date change only.
That is correct. Like I said, in the 2005 version of the general plan, it's specifically within that general plan laid out April 1st as the date. But state statute allows the council to, by a separate resolution, pick a date if it chooses so.
Okay.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes clearly have it. Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to this wonderful A word, which is adjournment. Do we have a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, council.